theme I wanted to talk to you both about was what we're calling the intent to action gap. So we're seeing increasing number of firms kind of committing to saying that they're going to implement new measures, they're going to introduce new technologies, but the data is showing that that's not necessarily happening at pace. And just a couple of data points here. So last year, 44% of firms reported that they were using advanced business intelligence tools, and 20% were planning implementation of those. But this year, only 46% have them in place, and just 14% are planning to implement. So that kind of stat has gone down, really. And in terms of the data side, which we've spoken a little bit about already, just 33% of firms at the moment are providing their associates with access to financial metrics like billing, for example. Why do you think there's such a persistent gap between strategy and execution for firms?
I'll start on the training side because I just get amazed that this remains a challenge, right? So why would you not want to build smarter business people in your law firm, right? Let's face it, partners make a lot of financial decisions on the fly, whether it's pricing, discounts, agreements. They're great negotiators. That's what they do. That's what litigators do, right? But they tend not to want to negotiate with their clients. And I think it's because they're operating from a position of weakness. I also think, we've seen the evolution of business professionals in law firms change dramatically over the last 5 to 10 years, where one, they brought in talent from outside of legal. Two, they're bringing business people into, both senior and kind of mid-management level positions where they're going to add a lot of value. They can take some of this heat off the partner in these negotiations with their clients. So, but back to the training bit, again, I think the firms that are doing this actually use this as a recruiting differentiator, and that, hey, we invest in you. We're going to show you how a law firm operates. We're going to teach you. You teach them as an associate, they take that all the way through their experience with the firm. And again, to me, they can make better decisions on the fly, in the heat of the battle, so to speak, that are just going to add profitability to the firm. So now let Rob maybe touch on the right data, the right place. But again, from my perspective, I don't see the downside here. I'm always amazed. Every year it kind of trips along at, 5% more did some training, or we go out and talk to clients all the time and ask them what are they doing to train their partners and associates on the kind of financial basics. And there's a whole lot that don't. And then you talk to their business professionals and their frustration is pretty evident.
And I guess you talk about recruitment, but the actual retention of talent side of things is huge as well. I mean, we did research last year that said the cost of losing an associate for a large law firm is about $1 million. So yeah, another reason why it's a no-brainer, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think touching on what Eric said, I think go back to the source of the problem. I think probably recently, given what we just talked about, there's probably been a push in a different direction with technology. Now that that's baked a little bit, I think you'll see people get back to the more nuts and bolts things that are important to law firms. I think one of the challenges that law firms have is sort of this split between the ownership of the problem, right? So if we think about what we were talking about earlier, it's the lawyer or the partner that's talking to the client. They're, whether they have to do a collections call or whether they're negotiating a new engagement with the business professional along with them. That information, that financial information, they have that problem. Whereas finance, the problem finance has is they see these issues, right? They see the decline in realization. They see the decline in profitability or in the growth at WIP, the growth in AR, right? So it's a splitting of the responsibility of the ownership of the problem. I think is one of the reasons why we see, firms struggle with adopting these kinds of technologies is that someone has to take ownership and say, this is the direction in which we want to go. So to Eric's point, we want to train all of our lawyers to be a bit more financially savvy, really, have just the nuts and bolts, the basics of how a law firm looks. I don't expect them to understand allocation methodologies, but just to understand the basics of a dollar in, dollar out realization, what that actually does. I think as you get more firms doing that, you then back that with technology. I think you're in a much better spot, but that ownership of the problem has to come from the top, and the firms have to adopt that. Otherwise, you're still going to get this yin and yang between, I need this information, I'm not going to get you this information. Because a firm will be successful if, we were saying this earlier, we used to have a tagline, right information, the right people, at the right time. Right? If you give the lawyer the right information, or if you give the associate, I even go down to the associate level. We talked about this earlier. your associate will be your partner one day, right? That's the whole point here, right? They will be running the business at some point. They will be owners of the business at some point. And to get them early on in understanding just the basic financial mechanics will serve you well in the future. And I think that's where we see some of this split is around the ownership of the issue. Actually owns putting this kind of stuff in. And
before they own the relationship, they'll own the case, right? So the ability to make good decisions on the fly is so important. I think the other thing that I find interesting is as more folks have come into law firms from outside of law firms. By the way, we love law firms. Yeah, it's great model. We love it. But at the end of the day, other professional service leaders have come in and said, why do we do things this way? Yeah, because we're different. I like, look, I was at PwC. I was at Deloitte. We do the same stuff, just in a different area of practice. And we figured, resource management out 20 years ago. We figured profitability at a partner level out a million years ago. We changed our comp model, a long, long time ago. So some of those drivers are working their way into law firms. It's definitely a slow roll, but I get back to, what's the downside of helping lawyers better understand how to drive profit?
There's not. I think, and to Eric's point, we have seen in the industry more and more folks from the outside come into those C-suites, and I think that has been a good driver for change for these law firms that have brought these people in. Because again, it's they're bringing fresh ideas like anything, right? If you bring people from the outside, fresh ideas are fresh ideas, and so they're starting to have an impact. And again, that goes back to what I was saying earlier about ownership. If someone coming in is empowered to make those changes will be to your benefit.
I mentioned about an investment in an adoption of technology, as well as being a driver and being able to surface the data that's needed for training as well. There's a lot of options on the market for surfacing financial data. What's your advice to a law firm leader that's kind of exploring those options, and what would you recommend that they kind of ask of potential vendors?
Yeah, I mean, the trite answer is obviously buy our stuff if we have the best one on the market. And I'll give out Eric's cell number later. The reality is this. I think we talked about this earlier too. Whatever path you go down, whatever you decide you're doing, I think the first thing you have to do is take a step back and understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Take stock of what you have internally. Right? Every law firm has something today. No law firm is operating completely naked with no understanding of any kind of numbers. So take stock of what you have today and understand where you want to go. And that will help you determine, okay, as you narrow your list, whether it's vendors, whether you buy, whatever it may be, and we'll talk about buying in a second, I think, building. But I think that's the first step. Understand where you want to go and what you currently have and what you can do without and what you really are table stakes going forward. I mean, that's step one. Step two then is you go to the market, figure out what's available. Obviously, we think we have the best one on the market. But if you're going to go buy, that's the next thing you do is figure out what's out there. Start doing your research. Start talking to your peers. Start talking to other firms in your area, your city, to understand what they're using, how they're using it. But that's step one, and there's step 2 and 3 after that. But I'll let Eric maybe.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I managed to work it in there. It gets back to what problem you're trying to solve, right? And I think law firms are pretty famous for not wanting to be first. So talk to your peers. It's a trusted-based business. Who's having a good experience with X software, whether it's Big Hands or somebody else's. The software will do what it's built to do, but having the right knowledge around it from an implementation, a delivery perspective, a support perspective, that relationship's going to evolve over time. You don't want just somebody coming in and go, look, the measures are in here. Here you go. It's somebody who can come in and say, look, have you thought about a different way to look at profitability? Have you thought about a different way to look at allocation? It doesn't mean you need to do it, but somebody who's giving you some ideas. That, I think, gets back to, we talk about build versus buy. That's one of the benefits of working with a vendor who works with hundreds of law firms, is we're aggregating that information across multiple firms that can advise our clients on maybe a better way to do things.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, and even taking what Eric was saying a bit and flipping it a little bit is a vendor that can come in and say, if, there's lots of great ideas out there that come from law firms. And sometimes in our case, we're in a fortunate position to have done this over 250 times to say to a client, specifically around BI, to say, you know what, we've seen someone try that before and didn't work out great for them. Or we've seen them try this, but maybe if you bend it for this flavor, you'll probably get the outcome you want. I think that's where you really get the benefit of a vendor coming in and helping you, because they have done it. They've been there, done that. And they've seen all the varieties, right? Every law firm, my experience has been, and particularly in this area, every law firm comes in and says, we have all these special metrics work, we have all these unique things. And really, when you get down to it, it's the same kind of metric that is another law firm's using, but there might be a slight twist to the calculation. 95% of these things are the same. There's about a 5% that's a little bit unique, and that's where you have a specialist come in and can really help you, because we've seen those 5%. Right? We've seen those in different firms, and we give you the idea of how to do those, and we could also point you in the right direction if we think you're going down the wrong way. That's not to say building isn't something that you may want to do. From my perspective and my experience, a lot of times when firms build, we typically get a phone call 4 or 5 years later because it didn't work out that way.
Either the person who wrote it left, which happens a lot, or they stagnate, right? So the argument for building is it's custom for what we need. It doesn't exactly what we needed to do. My argument would be it's also the day you deliver it obsolete, because you spent a year building it to a spec that you thought up a year ago. The business has evolved. Yeah. We're talking about how do you work AI into your pricing model. The in-house built systems aren't going to be able to deal with that. And one of the benefits, and we're a software vendor, one of the benefits, as I said earlier, is that we are able to constantly evolve the product based on how firms are using it. We don't have any good ideas. Our clients have great ideas, and we take advantage of that.
That is, again, the beauty of going, getting back to this idea of why is it stagnated and what, I think having a partner in this, right? We talked earlier about firms partnering with their clients, right? Well, let's reverse the dynamic, right? Firms partnering with vendors, vendors partnering with firms. Like, it is a partnership when you buy software. It is a partnership when you make that investment to put something in, and finding the right person or finding the right vendor to do that as you go and look at what you're dealing with, where do you want to go, partnering with the right vendor, you're going to have great outcomes. At the end of the day, it's just have good outcomes.